Tonight's video contains imagery that may be offensive to some viewers. It is presented in a historical context as it pertains to the American Civil War, the South, and Gibson history. Differing opinions exist on what this flag represents in regards to its use yet today, but I ask us to all be mature while talking about this topic. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Alright, so why is this the official 2022 Halloween guitar? It's because I'm literally terrified to make this and post this video because I have a 100% chance of offending somebody with this episode. No matter what, I'm sorry, we still need to talk about this because it's important through Gibson history. Inside here sleeps a very rare custom-ordered one-off guitar. It is what is known as the Confederate flag. Gibson called it the Rebel flag when they used it on their very few models that we'll be learning about today. But some people feel this represents slavery. I mean, it was kind of adopted because they were fighting to keep their slaves. However, to people of the South, a lot of them just view it as Southern heritage or Southern rock electric guitar because so many bands use this imagery for their touring and all that. So no matter what side of this you fall on, just let's remain respectful today while we document this pretty rare and special piece of Gibson history. Let's put this thing into context. The 80s was a crazy time for Gibson. We started to see a lot of cool custom colors coming about, like pearl white, charcoal metallic, Ferrari red, among many of others. But we also saw the introduction of modern day shred guitars, the 83 style Explorer and Flying V. And obviously everybody knows the 80s as all the crazy colors and pointy shapes and everything, so Gibson did something called the Designer Series, where basically most of them looked like these Flying Vs and Explorers. They had weird squiggly designs on them. They're not all that popular, but people are starting to appreciate them for what they are yet today. Obviously, some designs are better than others. However, if you look at the old marketing material for the Designer Series, you can actually see there is a subsection delegated to flags. Because it was cool back then to be patriotic, so one of the most well-known ones is the Union Jack Explorer, having a version kind of the Union Jack flag. Apparently it's not 100% right. I mean, Gibson rarely ever gets these things completely correct, but you could check out this review and demo if you want to learn more about this really rare beast. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have USA style ones. Even though it's not necessarily in that advert, there is a stars and stripes finish that you can find on an Explorer and the USA map guitar. The map guitar itself is not necessarily part of this series, it's just that particularly cool color. You can learn more about those in this episode, but those actually started as Epiphones if you didn't know that. They're pretty cool. I'll eventually own one. It wasn't until much later that Gibson actually made real USA flag guitars like this Les Paul here, which are slightly controversial in their own right. And then lastly, we have the Rebel Flag series. So Southern rock bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd and Allman Brothers, they adopted this flag, they used it as they were touring. A lot of people started to associate it with those bands, you know, like rebel feelings, you know, having a good time apparently. So it's only natural that Gibson would start to incorporate some of that on their guitars. So they introduced the Rebel Gibson Invader and the Rebel Gibson Studio. Now these things, from a design perspective, they're actually pretty fascinating. The fact that they have a matching headstock, which is something that Gibson really doesn't do all that often. I mean, the Union Jack has it on the body, and it's got it on the headstock. Now the Stars and Stripes version of the Explorer, not quite as cool because it doesn't have the matching headstock. But then there were also Victory bases that apparently had this finish as well. I have not seen one of those show up, but to be honest, I haven't really been looking. Because that's the other part of this tale. This guitar cannot be sold online. Reverb pulls them down. They will not let you list it. I believe eBay does the exact same thing. If you want to sell one of these, you have your own private website or go to a guitar forum. You basically have to sell it on the black market. These things are rare, but desirable is a different question. To me, the only appeal to owning this guitar is it's really, really rare because did you notice? I did not say Les Paul custom at all. Previous to today, I thought that was a Studio Invader exclusive. Another really cool Studio exclusive finish around this time was called Night Violet. It's like this really cool purple burst. So I've always been like really secretly hoping and waiting for like a Stars and Stripes and a Night Violet custom to surface, because if it existed, there's a very small chance that somebody could have custom ordered the finish on one. And unfortunately, I found this one first. But it brings me hope that those other ones might be out there. So how did I find this rare one-off piece? Well, a viewer of the show actually emailed me. He had some apprehensions about selling it online and wanted to see if I was interested. To which I said, I guess the time has come to talk about this one. And I was actually able to get an okay price on this that I felt was fair for this thing because it's actually been broken, quite appropriately maybe, depending on how you view the symbolism for this. So it's got a pretty nasty neck break on this that was repaired at one point in time pretty expertly. I mean, you could refinish over this area and make it look better. But here's the real kicker. This was not part of the designer series. You see that? It's a custom shop original, meaning this was custom ordered. And it dates to 1986. So this is kind of like my blue Les Paul Artisan. It's not supposed to exist, but it does. So I think we can all agree that's pretty cool from a Gibson history standpoint. However, despite this being a custom ordered one-off that's vintage, there's actually a famous user of almost this exact guitar, Zakk Wylde over here. Now, normally when you think Zakk Wylde, you think the Bullseye guitar, or maybe even the Buzzsaw, or maybe one of those crazy SGV type things, or maybe his current brand of Wylde Audio. However, one of his famous Les Pauls actually features the Rebel flag on it. Now, if you look at it today, it doesn't necessarily prominently promote it. That's because it's got a lot of history in and of itself. So that thing started life as a 1989 black custom, but he modded it with the paint job because he looked up to Skinnerd and the Allman Brothers and even Bret Michaels. So he painted that on his guitar and he started to experiment with it, sanded in a couple of areas to make it play better. Eventually started to nail beer caps on it. However, I didn't know this. I thought he intentionally burnt it, but no, it was at a Ozzy Osbourne photo shoot. He was with that band. Someone took the guitar, wrapped it up with newspaper, and lit the thing on fire, probably because of some of the imagery on the guitar. Then later on down the line, his daughter accidentally knocked over some guitars, and that guitar got a headstock break. So that's another reason why this one's kind of funny that it also has a repair on it. And then Gibson just ended up putting a new neck on it for him. But that is the story behind the bottle caps Les Paul. Another user to famously sport this design on his guitar was Dimebag Darrell. Now, not a Gibson Les Paul custom, but a Washburn V/Explorer type thing. Now, he had a few different ones of these. Ones with a flat design and then one that was a little bit more wavy. So all in all, we've got a pretty interesting piece today, but let's go ahead and do all of our normal stuff, throw it on the workbench, and then eventually get to that playing demo. Inside the Rebel Custom here, I'd really be curious to hear Zakk Wylde's opinion on this guitar. The one that he wanted, I wonder if he knew that it actually existed. But anyways, being a 1986 guitar, we should still have Tim Shaw PAFs in here. That's like the last year that you really start to see them. I mean, you can find them all the way till 87, but that's when you start to see other series come into play. So the easiest way to tell a Tim Shaw is first look at your base plate screws. If they're not brass like this one, you do not have a Tim Shaw PAF. And then if you do, you have a pretty good chance. And you can go through a checklist of other things like what color spacers are on the inside, what kind of magnets are used. Another one of those steps being the ink stamp that's on them. Now you have to remember, after 1985, they stopped doing that. So just because you don't have ink stamps doesn't mean you don't have Tim Shaws. But if it's been untouched and you got these guys and it's this, you can pretty much assume it's just a Tim Shaw PAF. So that's a good sign that this one at least still has the original pickups left in it. We should be around 7.5 in our readings. So 7.33 in the bridge, that's right. And neck 7.32. That's a healthy set of Tim Shaws. 3.66 in the middle just for fun. Now let's check out our pickup cavities. I mean, are we sure this is actually the original finish? Yeah, I'm pretty darn confident. You've got the white here, you got a little bit of blue, and then right under that you've got the red. Now had this been a refinish, you'd probably see paint in these cavities right here, because usually refinishers don't take the time to mask that stuff off. But here you can see the maple top on the mahogany body. And here's what the bridge pickup route looks like. Once again, a half line right here with a little bit of blue and white with the bare mahogany exposed. Everything's looking good to me so far. Bridge is the typical Schaller made in Germany version. It has appropriate wear for its age. The tailpiece is also full weight and appears to be original. Then our knobs have some very nice age to them. That's nice because typically after 1985 the knobs stop aging. So these might be slightly older knobs that are on this one. In the non-original case we actually have white pickup rings, a white poker chip, and some clear knobs. And Gibson did like to use clear knobs on these designer series flag guitars like you can see over here. So it's possible those might actually be the original ones. We'll have to blacklight and see. And then maybe somebody just added the older gold ones to match the gold hardware. So I'm not really sure if this left the factory with the poker chip or not. You can definitely see some scratching around there, so somebody has had one on here. But to display the design, maybe they didn't, maybe they did, I don't know. But you've got lots of finish checking on this bad boy in your typical high stress areas. This lighting helps show some of the other finish checking that this particular example has. The graphic finishes are pretty well known for doing that, so that's nothing out of the ordinary in my opinion. However, it looks like somebody left a strap on this, like with some strap locks or something, and it just rested against the finish and eventually impressed into it. That's alright, nothing a couple of bottle caps won't cover. But here you can see a continuation of that break. That must have been pretty nasty, but it didn't really affect the top too much. It really wasn't that deep, it just kind of skirted around under here and then stopped. You can see the continuation of the crack pattern and how it just stops in that area. Now, if you're thinking that's that over here, no, that's just where the maple top joins onto the mahogany body. Just about that far. So maple top, mahogany back. Let's move on to our mahogany neck. Remember, 1982, they start to transition back into mahogany, and we've got our regular ebony fretboard here. So pretty standard spec as far as this goes. 22 low wide frets with your mother of pearl block inlays. The typical 24 3/4 inch scale length, 12 inch fretboard radius. The nut measures 1.71 inches and 2.03 by the 12th. With the first fret neck depth of 0.83, which chunks up to 0.96, but don't let that measurement fool you. It's because the heel's starting. These are not huge necks by any means. Here's that neck at the first fret and the 12th fret. Standard C shape. And as far as our headstock goes, we can see once again the mahogany neck right here, and our truss rod is in perfect shape with the standard Les Paul custom truss rod cover. And you have your mid-80s Gibson logo and the big old block custom emblem. Pretty nice looking headstock. Now, you could complain that they didn't do the matching headstock with the body. It's not as special as the studio. However, in this case, I think I'm okay. Although having that stripe on this with like being a blue headstock while having all the rest of the logos on it would have been interesting and potentially a possibility since it was a custom order, but not on this one. Maybe there's a different custom order out there, but I doubt it. The nut is suspiciously low profile. I'm curious if somebody has replaced that and touched up the lacquer on the edges, but I guess I could just be wrong because it's looking clean right now. Moving on to the backside is where the fun begins. I was really hoping to find one of the Leonard family members' signature in here. However, unfortunately, I do not see any. I mean, sometimes you do find it on the base plate, so maybe it rubbed off over the years, but probably safe to assume no. But the pots date to very late 1986, which matches the tone pots even a little bit later, like almost into 87. So that's all stock, guaranteed. However, the finish checking continues on the back here. Now, having this much checking in one area is a little bit unusual on a Les Paul Custom. It just kind of stops right there. I mean, we've got checking pretty much all over this thing. It must have something to do with this particular finish and the weather conditions that this was presented. I mean, this is kind of close to what Ferrari red looks like. It's just a little bit darker, and some of that might just come from, you know, this actually started white and it is now yellow. But Ferrari red has a white base coat, and I'm not seeing that anywhere. So this was, all intents and purposes, kind of a custom color. It almost reminds me of like an ember red. But here you can see our toggle switch, and no, they didn't do any fancy graphics back here, nor did they put anything like that on the edges. Now is where things get fun. The break here. So it was kind of hilarious. This was first presented to me as a finish crack. And I had to tell him, no, that's a little bit more extreme than a finish crack, my friend. I'm sure that was just the story that he was told and he was repeating it, but no, this is definitely a real separation in the neck. Because it stems perfectly from this side all the way over to the other one. So the entire neck just snapped off, which is very uncommon for a Les Paul. Usually it's this part of the headstock that snaps because it's angled back. But very rarely you will see the heel break. Generally it's SGs that break here because they're so thin in this area. But that must have been some impact. Had that not had happened though, this would have been an incredibly valuable guitar. However, at the same time, I'm kind of glad it did happen because I didn't have to pay so much for it. But it must have been pretty clean for the most part because it really didn't mess up too much of the neck in this area. So normally, repaired guitars do not belong in my collection, but Due to the fact that this is a custom-ordered one-off original built outside of the designer series era, it definitely deserves a spot in the museum, even if it is a little bit of a controversial piece. As far as the rest of the neck goes, it's actually pretty clean. We don't have any breaks, cracks, or repairs there. We have the Grover-style tuners that they were using in this era. It's completely stock and original, as far as I can tell. On to our blacklight test. Everything's looking like it's glowing the way I would want to see as far as a nice even finish here. Except, of course, the obvious repair area that doesn't glow at all because it had to have been touched up. And our headstock's also looking nice, as is the backside of the guitar. And now, this is how you can prove that it's not just a finish crack. Because these areas have definitely been touched up and you can kind of feel it. It was a good repair, it's definitely playable and it's held. But maybe, just maybe, this side was finish only. So maybe they only had to inject some glue into it to make it 100% firm. Because mainly what you're seeing right here is where the binding truly ends. Like, that's definitely a stress fracture. And maybe that does start slightly before right there, because that does look rather chattered. But it is what it is. It's part of the history of this one, and I think it's rather apropos. But now, as far as the knobs, I am shocked those are not vintage. They certainly look the part, but apparently not. So here's what those clear ones glow as. They don't really have much of any glow at all. But if we're being real here, on my Union Jack that I know is 100% original as far as that goes, they don't really glow either. And remember, I told you after about 1985, the knobs stopped glowing. So who knows, maybe that's also part of that phenomenon. Well, after some thinking on that front, I compared those knobs to the other ones. They both have the white in the center. I do believe these are the original knobs to this guitar. And eventually they will all be displayed together, so it kind of makes sense that they should have the matching white knobs. However, I think I would argue the gold ones might just look better now that the guitar has aged a little bit. All said and done, this is a chunky beast at 10.5 pounds. 10 pounds, 8.4 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. Now that we know all about the Gibson Rebel Flag Les Paul Custom, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Well, I guess I'm glad to say I've done the review, I've taught the history lesson. Yes, Gibson did make these in the past. Will they ever make them again? I highly doubt it. This guitar makes me uncomfortable. However, as a player, is it fantastic? Not really. It kind of feels a little bit stiff, but usually guitars that don't get played a whole lot do kind of get that feeling. You have to set them up and dial them in, get some fresh strings. I thought what was on here wasn't too bad, so I just let that part go. But I hope you troglodytes enjoyed the history lesson and knowing that, hey, yeah, there is a Les Paul Custom out there, so there is hope that I'll find that purple burst and maybe the stars and stripes and who knows what other cool, quirky, custom colors might be out there. Take care.
Hey, if you enjoyed tonight's episode, you might want to learn about Billy Gibbons' Texas-shaped guitar that Gibson made for him back in the 80s. Yeah, it's a real thing. Go ahead and click it. What are you waiting for?